This week, let me get to the top of the page. Anna von Reitz gave quite a long update, which some of you will have read, but I'd like to cover on this show for some of the people that haven't seen it or been able to grasp basically what it's been said. This was sent to Joseph Dunford, care of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon in Washington. It was also sent to the Board of Governors, World Bank, IBRD, IMF, and the Board of Directors of the same people, also in Washington, D.C. Final notice of commercial obligation lien, World Bank, IBRD/IMF, as of January 2016. You are in receipt of our final notice referenced above. We have received no answer to our 5 claim assertions from Karen Hulis in her position as a trustee for the so-called Global Debt Facility, but have received complaints via internet claiming that we didn't notify you prior to the final notice. In fact, we have given you and your franchises nearly 3 years of due process, up to and including the final notice of commercial and administrative default as of February the 3rd, 2014, and a final judgment and civil orders April the 11th, also 2014, issued to the State of Alaska and Joseph Everhart, Regional President of Wells Fargo, amongst others responsible as agents. Ms. Hudis also claims that we don't have standing. That's a laugh coming from her. When in fact we already have established standing as a matter of record with the Vatican Chancery Court 2010 and provided due process notice of our standing to Queen Elizabeth II and her registered agents for the past 2 years, and to the corporate managers of the IMF doing business as United States Inc., all capitals, and its various state franchises since 2011. I'll repeat that again. The IMF doing business as the United States Inc., all capitals, and its various state capitals franchises since 2011. There is absolutely no doubt that we have revoked any presumed election of political status apart from that of our birthright. We have formally declared that this is being so, the only ones having first-hand knowledge of the facts and our intentions, that we stand on the land jurisdiction in the United Colonies of America and are entitlement holders, first copyright holders, and beneficiaries of all estates, lowercase, E states, with E being a capital letter, and estates all in capitals, as well as any derivatives such as public transmitting utilities held in our given names and are lawful heirs of our progenitors, having material interest in all inheritable private property and all public property vested in the land of the organic states and the states of America and the United Colonies of America in sum total. Basically what that's saying is we the people are the owners of everything except the 10 square miles called the District of Criminals, not Columbia, District of Criminals sounds better. The following facts now stand as unrebutted truth in commerce and international law. 1. The World Bank were secondary creditors in the 1933 bankruptcy of the United States of America Incorporated. 2. Upon settlement of the bankruptcy of the United States of America Incorporated, the World Bank, IBRD, knowingly received gold and other assets belonging to the priority creditors, that's us, we the people, who are and always have been the free, sovereign and independent people of the United States and the unincorporated states of America. 3. The gold reserves contained in the Global Debt Facility and other accounts administered by the World Bank, IBRD, and International Monetary Fund, known as the Infinity accounts, were obtained at least in part as a result of illegal confiscations of privately held gold carried out by the administration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, promoted under inequitable exchange, duress, and indemnity, followed by identity theft, falsification of political status records, and reverse trust and fiduciary trust fraud. 4. The American gold and other assets such as credit and titles to land, together with reasonable interest, is owed as an inheritance to the living American people and their unincorporated organic states from which the gold was obtained. 5. Ms. Karen Hudis has been informed that there is no constitutional authority allowing for any officials or agents of the federal United States, including federal, state, and federal county officials, to receive assets on behalf of the living people and the incorporated states. She has also been informed there is no agreement on the part of the lawful beneficiaries allowing the World Bank, IBRD, IMF to use our gold to pay for, buy back, or otherwise collateralize Federal Reserve notes, United States notes, or any other private bank script. From what I understand with this, Miss Hudis and her World Bank buddies don't fall for her bullshit, and that's what she's spouting. She always has. We covered this 2 years ago with Neil Keenan. Like a bad penny, she turns up every now and again. She seems to think that the World Bank and the IMF should collect our gold and then dish it out according to their whims, i.e. pay off all the banker buddies, including the Federal Reserve, which is completely bankrupt, the United States Inc., which is also completely bankrupt, and all other bank and cronies. And we might get a little handout. Really, Miss Hudis, we never felt for it 2 years ago, and we're not falling for it now either. Viewed against this backdrop, the attempts to launder the purloined assets via the mechanism of donating them to the Global Debt Facility is at best for silly, self-interested, and easily discounted subterfuge to escape culpability for failure to notify the actual priority creditors, that's us, we the people, and for making false claims of abandonment benefiting the secondary creditors. This goes back into the Seswi trusts. Because we didn't claim the trusts, they think they own them. They may think again shortly. A month ago, we were informed that the insolvent United States Inc., or capitalized, run by the IMF as an agency of the UN Corporation, would not be making its payroll obligation to the American Armed Forces. Just recently, we have been informed that Jacob Rothschild has purchased the insolvent United States Inc. and proposed to use our own military as an undisclosed commercial mercenary force to collect upon debts that he and everyone else associated with the World Bank has caused to know are fraudulent and have been fraudulent ever since 1863. Ms. Hudis apparently believed that this purchase of a bankrupt governmental services corporation entitled her to tell General Dunford what to do and how high to jump. We had to disabuse her of this presumption upon us and other Americans who comprise the actual government of the United States of America. As we made clear to Ms. Hudis, and as we'll make clear to all of you, fact trumps fiction. The principal trumps the agent. The landlord trumps the representative. The free, sovereign, and independent people are the government of the United States of America, All governmental services corporations and British subject inhabitants engaged in providing such services are at best agents in our employ similar to an estate manager or operations overseer. Let the record show that we, the people, have never been bankrupt, never insolvent, and haven't gone to war in 150 years. It's them, not us. It should also be abundantly apparent that the mismanagement, odious debts, and criminal acts perpetrated by our hirelings in no way reflect upon us and constitutes no valid claim against us, nor any valid claim against our assets, both public or private. These governmental service corporations and the banks responsible for running them are separate entities responsible for their own business decisions. Their only business with respect to us is faithfully provide 19 explicitly described and enumerated essential government services. We interpret the present circumstances as the parent corporation taking over a bankrupt subsidiary and offering to continue its operation under new management. In effect, operating itself as a successor to contract. This offer has been rebuffed, as it again involves retention of our property and presumption upon us that was never appropriate to begin with. The American people and the organic states were infamously abused by the British monarch in breach of trust and by Franklin Roosevelt's administration, which fraudulently involves us as sureties backing the bankrupt United States of America, Inc. in 1933. Despite the Geneva Conventions, which outlawed slavery and peonage worldwide in 1926, and the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which outlawed war in 1928, a fraud scheme using deceptively similar names to promote false claims against and control over the American people was executed by Roosevelt via the creation of the Foreign Citizens Trust that were named after living Americans presumed to be doing business under the names of identical style, example, John Quincy Adams, and registered as franchises of the bankrupt Governmental Services Corporation doing business as the United States of America, Inc. These civilly dead and bankrupted personas were then systematically used to promote personage and barratry against the living victims and used to remove them from their birthright status on the land to a foreign international status in the jurisdiction of the sea. Effectively press-ganging Americans and their assets in contravention of international law standing since the Napoleonic era. Claims and charges made against John Quincy Adams, Foreign Citizens Trust owned and operated by the State of Wisconsin franchise of the United States of America, Inc., are visually unidentifiable from any similar claims and charges made against a living man lawfully using the name John Quincy Adams. Left unaware of what the Roosevelt administration had done and claimed about them, hundreds of millions of Americans paid debts they never owed. The Foreign Citizens Trust were used as siphons to suck the substance from their labour and their resources under conditions of non-disclosure and deceit, and used to set up the institutionalized fraud scheme known as the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System seized upon the names, labor, private assets, and public assets of the American people and the organic state of the Union as presumed sureties, supposedly standing good for the bankrupted Governmental Services Corporation doing business as the United States of America, Inc., and its State of Wisconsin and State of Florida and other franchises. The banks used these assets as collateral to back the debts of the bankrupt service company. All our assets to keep them going. This fraud scheme has involved both bankruptcy and probate fraud on a massive scale and has been carried out by two private business enterprises. My favourite people. The American Bar Association and the Internal Revenue Service, both owned and operated by the Northern Trust Inc. These undeclared foreign agents have operated under the colour of law for decades. The bar members are in open violation of the 1947 Bar Association Treaty, allowing their presence on our soil. These bar associations have misrepresented themselves as harmless professional service organisations while operating private bill collection agencies disguised as public courts, all without licence, proper identification or consent. The Internal Revenue Service has operated in a similarly lawless and clandestine manner. Employees of the IRS have misrepresented themselves as part of our lawful government when in fact they've been totally independent private bill collectors operating as privateers on our shores and routinely committing fraud and inland piracy against American state citizens. The IMF, doing business as the United States Inc., and its franchises doing business as the state of Wisconsin and state of Florida, took up the active business of providing governmental services without consent, knowledge or permission of the victims of this fraud scheme. They began charging their fees against the victims' aggregate collateral also. They and their agencies then also sent bills to the living people, giving the false impression that the living people were responsible for payment of corporate franchise debts. Together, the colluding bank-run governmental service corporations, one bankrupt, one active, were effectively double-dipping. Charges against the United States of America Inc. and its bogus franchises were charged off against our public treasury, while current charges were sent to the living people using the same given name. The IMF used the same basic method of fraud as the Federal Reserve System. Instead of foreign citizens trusts named after living Americans, the IMF set up SESWIKV trusts. I'm not too sure I've said that right, but I think you'll get me meaning. And set up the same cozy arrangement for itself using institutionalized personage and barratry as a means of emptying American pockets and placing false claims against American assets. IMF franchises were named in the style John Quincy Adams, all capitalized. That is the key. And though they were all mysteriously born on the land of the organic states of the Union, they were removed to Puerto Rico, where they were mercilessly plundered, raped and pillaged by members of the American Bar Association and the Internal Revenue Service. So in other words, your registrations were moved to Puerto Rico so they can hammer you or us. Nature has run its course, and as of March 2015, the United States Inc. has been insolvent. In response, Barack Hussein Obama has set up another round of the same fraud by creating more franchises constructed to be bankrupt Puerto Rican public transmitting utilities operated under the name of Living Americans and styled using only middle initials, John Q. Adams. This is the syntax that David Wynne Miller explained, how they just change one word. Like most people will say the Constitution of the United States when it's the Constitution for the United States. This is how they change things without you noticing, and they can operate in this manner. These are completely illegal names, void of meaning for lack of specificity, Yet millions of innocent Americans who are the employers and benefactors of these bank-run governmental service corporations are paying bogus account statements and tax bills owed by equally bogus corporate franchises, which are in fact the responsibility of the banks and the governmental services corporations that created them. So in other words, they're sending you tax bills and statements like the utilities, which they should pay for, and they're telling us that we do. When the good Joes get wise and refuse to pay, these same criminally mismanaged organisations use racketeering and armed extortion and false legal processes to ensure compliance. Jacob Rothschild has just recently purchased the IMF bankrupt United States Inc. and proposed to use it as a successor to contract under new management. All of it was undisclosed to the victims, the actual American people and American states. We have forthrightly objected to this proposed solution, which is merely an even more venal and unconscionable round of war crimes against innocent people who misplaced their trust in the British monarch, obligated to act as their trustee on the high seas and navigable inland waterways since 1783. The city-state of Westminster, which promised them perpetual amity since 1794, and what they mistakenly thought of as their government. Yes, good old Queen Elizabeth. We've had enough of her. I had enough of her when I was back in England. We have concluded treaties with the American indigenous nations to go forward and preserve the requirements of the original and only equity contract known as the Constitution for the United States of America. The only capitalized is the S as in state and A as in America. United is not capitalized at all. So I'll repeat that again. The Constitution for the United, all lowercase, states, capital S, all lowercase, of America, capital A, and the rest all lowercase. It is still in effect viable and enforceable upon all parties, including the British monarch. All concerned are responsible for bringing a halt to this criminality and fraud, which has led to the de facto enslavement of Americans, Canadians, Australians, Europeans, Japanese, and others around the world. The intent of the World Bank, IBRD, IMF to avoid culpability in this matter is clear, but as we have informed Ms. Judas, that won't be possible. So long as these institutions retain any American assets received as a result of institutionalized fraud, the World Bank, IBRD, IMF are accomplices to it, and they remain subject to liquidation as criminal organizations in possession of stolen property, operating in violation of their charters. The sum total of all this fraud and legal chicanery is that we are owed all our assets back free and clear of lien, claim or encumbrance. That includes both private and public assets without further obfuscation, delay or denial. Any audit of our property received under false claim of abandonment, all gold confiscated by FDR from living Americans, all land titles and deeds held under the colour of law, all copyrights, all patents, all deeds, all registrations, certificates, bonds and similar instruments, plus interest and acquisitions being held by the World Bank, IBRD and IMF must be turned over to our appointed fiduciary, Deputy General Joseph F. Dunford Jr. and our international agent, Chief Michael Young of the Athabasca. All gold secured by General Dunford is to be used as collateral backing for our actual money. The United States silver dollar, no dollar-for-dollar exchange rate will be honoured with respect to Federal Reserve notes or United States Treasury notes or any other private fiat script. We are reclaiming our own property, both public and private, which was improperly involved in the private bankruptcies of governmental services corporations which had no authority to take any such action or make any such claims against their employers and their employers' assets. To the best of our knowledge and belief, the actual status of the ownership interests established after the American Revolution are these. The unincorporated United Colonies of America received all jurisdiction, including air, land, and sea. They formed the unincorporated and separate states of America. These formed an unincorporated union of states known as the United States of America via the Articles of Confederation, and a single unincorporated joint stock company doing business as the United States Trading Company, which was bankrupted by Lincoln in 1863. Please note that the only insolvent entity was an unincorporated joint stock company operating in the international jurisdiction of the sea, not the land. This would be analogous to your lawn maintenance service or housekeeping company going bankrupt. The Holy See bought the derelict United States Trading Company and created two new incorporated entities doing business in the international jurisdiction of the sea as the United States of America, Inc. and the District of Columbia Municipal Corporation, which were run from 1868 until bankrupted by President Wilson and bought out by the Federal Reserve, 1912. The Federal Reserve banks then operated the bankrupt entity doing business as the United States of America, Inc. and the District of Columbia Municipal Corporation in receivership and created another version known as the United States of America, Inc., which they also bankrupted in 1933, together with all bogus foreign scissors trusts that FDR named after living Americans and their organic states. They also created US Corp, USA Inc., and Washington, D.C. Municipality and other franchises. The IMF bought out the bankrupt United States of America, Inc., together with its franchises and operated it under receivership at the same time they operated the USA and created the United States Inc. Capitals, Washington, D.C. Capitals, State of Maine Capitals, and similarly named franchises and necessary K trusts named after living Americans and styled like this: John Quincy Adams, all capitalized. Upon finally being released from bankruptcy reorganization in 1999, the Federal Reserve System was fully liquidated and the Federal Reserve banks booted up their brand new version called the Federal Reserve, all capitals, under the auspices of the United Nations City-State. The new Federal Reserve set up shop as the United States of America, Inc., all capitals, and set up state franchises for itself run simply as Ohio and New York. At the same time, right on schedule, the IMF, doing business as the United States Inc., all capitals, was busy charging our credit to the moon and creating bankrupt public transmitting utilities via abuse of our given names and preparing to bankrupt the United States Inc., which went insolvent as of March 2015. Enter Jacob Rothschilds to buy up the bankrupt entity USA Inc. and its state franchises and KV trusts named after living Americans, obviously intending to start yet another round of this abuse. All of it has finally come out, gentlemen. All the mechanisms, all the excuses, all the lies that have been used to enslave men for generations lie on the table in front of us, exposed. This is no longer a matter of a foreign governmental services corporation calling the shots and telling their employers how much they're going to charge and what service they're going to provide, and then hypothecating debt against their unwilling customers' assets to pay for whatever they want to sell. For example, Obamacare. It's no longer a matter of entrapping innocent people in bankruptcy and probate and political status frauds. It's no longer a matter of scheming to hide commercially mercenary armies in the guise of being government agencies on our soil. Millions of people are watching, and they know the truth. General Dunford, we are, in the words of the Definitive Treaty of Peace, Paris 1783, free, sovereign and independent people of the United States, American people operating in our completely unincorporated and unenfranchised capacity. We are part of the unincorporated government on the land of the people, by the people and for the people, owed to the United Colonies of America, the States of America, and the United States of America. None of these entities are bankrupt now, nor have they ever been. We are heirs to them in joint sovereignty, enabled to act under the last man standing rule to enforce our material interests and contracts, and to uphold the only constitution the States of America have ever had with any federal entity, the Constitution for the United States of America. We have been misrepresented and suffered breach of trust at the hands of the British monarch. We have been mischaracterized as the United States citizens and the United States citizens' capital by his undeclared agents, and have been press-ganged into the foreign international jurisdiction of the sea, literally kidnapped off the land via legal chicanery, probate fraud and semantic deceit. We have suffered inland piracy and unlawful conversion of our assets and treason at the hands of members of Congress. That is not our Congress, a Congress whose only business with respect to us is to provide the 19 enumerated services in good faith. We have suffered personage and barratry and fraudulent claims against us and our assets. All these war crimes against innocent Americans have been exercised against us beginning in 1863, again in the 1930s by the Roosevelt administration, and a repeat of the same pattern would occur if we stood by and allowed Mr. Rothschild to buy the bankrupt United States Inc. and operate it under new management as a successor to contract. Nearly there. This is why we have objected to any such succession or claim of contract or interest in us, or any further abuse of our given names by false and self-interested usufructs merely pretending to represent us in this manner. We challenge anyone on earth to demonstrate where in the Constitution for the United States of America we gave our servants the delegated authority to prey upon us and misrepresent us in the matter of our political status, and also to provide proof that the duty of the United States statutes at large regarding conversion of an American state citizen to the status of United States citizen were ever performed. We, the Union States, won the American Civil War. We preserved our Union under the Articles of Confederation. We have acknowledgement of the facts preserved as the unbroken armistice signed by General Lee and General Grant, and in the form of 3 public proclamations issued by President Andrew Johnson. We need no other proof that our Union is alive, well and intact. We will not stand by and allow a foreign crime syndicate to confuse us and our state with their phony misrepresentations of us, and we will not allow the banks to continue to pretend to hold any debts against us, nor will we tolerate any continued misuse of our assets. Our government is not in any way integrum as a result of the failures of foreign governments and governmental services corporations merely under contract to provide us with services. Our trustee in the jurisdiction of the air, the Pope, and the British monarch, who was our trustee on the high seas and inland waterways, are obligated to provide us and our government with good faith service, which includes admission of their failures and immediate action to bring peaceful remedy, protecting and preserving the peace of our country and the well-being of our national trust. That does not include letting British Crown commercial interests to promote the use and abuse of alphabet soup agencies like the FBI to act as disguised armed commercial mercenaries on our soil. Well, we've seen that evidence of that this week. Nor does it permit our international trustees to ignore the long-standing fraud and criminality which their predecessors' misadministration has caused both here and abroad. Despite the failures of the British-backed trading companies and later their governmental services corporations, and also the failures of the general governments of both the federal United States, operating as the United States of America Minor, composed of the 7 insular states and the District of Columbia, and the municipal government of Washington, D.C., our government of the people, by the people, and for the people still stands. We are present now and telling you and the rest of the known world that we've been mercilessly attacked and bamboozled by these foreign bank-run governmental services, pretending to represent our trusted allies and trustees and public servants. These organizations are criminal in nature and can only be forgiven to the extent that they are ignorant and to the extent to which they make sincere efforts to repent and repay and return our assets without further ado. Employees have no power whatsoever to indebt, enslave, or practice fraud against their employees. Likewise, corporations merely representing our lawful government have no power to object when squarely countermanded by the actual government, the people of this country. Abraham Lincoln made it the duty of the Grand Army of the Republic to protect our money. This is a duty that the GR manifestly failed on an epic scale. The American Armed Forces of today, which are successors of the Grand Army of the Republic, should be greatly motivated to secure assets that are owed to us and to accept and carry out the will of the American people to correct this outrageous circumstance, end this fraud, and redirect our resources according to our principles and in our own best interests. We and approximately 360 million other Americans are the living heirs, entitlement holders, beneficiaries, priority creditors, first copyright holders of our given names, and inheritors of the land of the organic states and all assets of the land jurisdiction owed to the United Colonies of America and the States of America and the United States of America. We are thus members of a class of people enabled under the last man standing rule to exercise all options of the contracts and empowerments we have inherited in the joint sovereignty, and are responsibly presenting ourselves and expressing our will to our employees, deputies and agents before the entire world community. We are hereby appointing Chief Michael Young of the Athabasca to be our trustworthy peer and business agent to act on our behalf internationally to secure our misappropriated property assets and return them to the American people, the organic states and the sovereign nation states to which these assets, both public and private, naturally belong to, properly administer the federal side of the original and only actual equity contract known as the Constitution for the United States of America, which our peoples are jointly and severely owed. We are hereby appointing Joseph Dunford in his capacity as Commanding General of the American Armed Forces to act as our fiduciary deputy to retrieve, secure and transport all gold assets with the copyrights, the patents, the registration certificates, bonds, titles, deeds, land patents, insurances, securities, beneficial contracts, bills of lading, escrow account receipts, silver, jewels, art, artifacts, and material interests however represented or contained and belonging to the American people and their organic states of the Union, which are improperly in the possession of the Global Debt Facility, the World Bank, IBRD, IMF, and the Bank of International Settlements, or any other international bank where these assets have been purloined as abandoned assets or otherwise obtained via process of bankruptcy fraud, probate fraud, semantic deceit, unlawful conversion, press ganging, kidnapping, and misrepresentation of political status. We are calling upon Pope Francis in his extraordinary capacity as trustee of the Unum Sanctum Trust and the jurisdiction of the heir, and upon the British monarch in their capacity as trustee responsible for our delegated interest on the high seas and inland waterways, where all this outrageous damage and misadministration has occurred, to promptly correct all false and improper claims and presumptions being held against us and our organic states of the Union worldwide, and upon the Lord Mayor, Lords of the Admiralty, Innis of Court, and the British Crown Corporation, Bank of England, and other principals and parties of the Westminster to recall and honour their treaty, guaranteeing us friendship in perpetuity. Certainly our friendship and that of similarly wronged Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, and numerous European countries has preserved both the monarchy and the papacy into modern times, and without our sacrifices and efforts in their behalf, neither institution would have escaped the further ravages of the Second World War, which is caused in part by the same fraud schemes by the same international banks and bar associations which we now address. We're also calling upon the Secretary General of the United Nations to properly advise and inform the member states of the United Nations, the Security Council, and the Trust Committees. It is not our intention, nor is it our desire to deprive any other nation, such as China, to obtain redress which it is similarly owed. We are not seeking to harm anyone and are in fact taking this action to prevent more harm to living people and lawful governments throughout the world. And upon rights this week. Comments, please, Drake.
It don't sound to me like she left anything out.
No, just about, no.